This is a video that shows how to start a new timeline for a sound file, to create time points on the timeline, and then to create different bubbles or groups on the timeline. I'm going to start up Audio Timeliner by clicking on the icon. And here is the starting menu. I'll click on Choose Audio for a new timeline. And this audio is on the desktop, so I'll click on there. And here is this MP3 file right there. So you can create an audio timeline for an MP3 or a WAV or MP4 file. I'll click on Open, and let me resize this window. All right, and here's the new audio timeline file. I can play this MP3 file by clicking on Play. This is Stop, and then here's the Fast Forward and Rewind. You can also pause by pressing the space bar, and so forth. You notice this blue bubble is a bubble for is sort of the bubble showing the timeline of the entire file. You see that it goes off the screen, so the bubble sort of takes up more than it takes up more than the window. So if I click on Fit to Window, that will shrink down the zoom so that the entire file fits onto one screen. Now suppose we wanted to mark where cadences appeared in this excerpt. A cadence is an event, so the way we do that is by clicking this button here, which is to mark an event. Or another way of doing it is by clicking pressing Command and then pressing Return. I'll use the command Return, and I'm going to play the file, and where the cadence occurs, I'll press Command Return to mark it. Half cadence. PAC. Now I can put labels underneath these time points, and the way I do that is first I move my mouse over this time point, which is the triangle, and you see that it turns into a hand. If I double click on it, this new window will pop up that lets me label it, and I can write down comments if I wish, like that. I'll click on Apply and OK, and then I'll do the same thing for this arrow over here. And another way of clicking on or sort of labeling a marker is by using these buttons right here. So if I'm in this window, if I press this previous button, it takes me to the previous marker. And if I press the next one, it takes me over to the next one. And if you have like several different markers, sometimes that's an easier way of moving between them. I'll click on OK. And I'll click on Rewind to go back to the beginning of this sound file. Now suppose we want to mark where the antecedent and consequent phrases are. The way we'll do that is by using this Add button right here. When I click on this Add, that basically makes a boundary between two bubbles. And a bubble is basically showing a section or a phrase within this sound file. And so when the antecedent phrase ends and the consequent phrase begins, I'll click on this to create that boundary. Another way I can do that is by just pressing the Return button. Oops. Okay, I made a couple of mistakes there. First, I clicked on that Add when I didn't mean to. In other words, these two bubbles are supposed to be one giant bubble showing the consequent phrase. So to get rid of this division here, I'll just click on the second bubble, and I can either press this Delete button right here, or just press the Delete key, which I'll do right now. That gets rid of that second bubble, and now we have one large bubble showing the consequent phrase. The other mistake I made is that I was a little bit late when I was marking the beginning of the consequent phrase. Let me show you. So if you click on a bubble, the playback will go automatically to its beginning, and so I can click on it and press play to hear where it starts. So the consequent phrase actually begins a little bit earlier than where I marked, than where I clicked. And so what you can do is if you move your mouse over to that boundary, you see how it changes into those two vertical lines. If I click now, I can drag this boundary back a little bit. Let's try that. That's better. And now I can label these bubbles just like I labeled the time points. So I'll double click on this one. Let me move that window. Let's call it antecedent. Apply. And then I could click OK and double click on this, but it's easier to use these arrows, just like with the time points. So I'll click on right to go to the next bubble. Click Apply, and click on OK. Now suppose we wanted to show that this antecedent and consequent are all part of one large period. The way we can do that is we can select both of them and then create a larger group that encompasses both of them. So I'll select both by clicking on one, pressing Shift, and then clicking on the other, and you see that they're both dark, which means that they are both selected. Or I can use my mouse and draw a box around both of them, and that also selects both of them. I've selected both. Now I'll click on Group, and voila, that makes a larger bubble that encompasses both. I'll label this period, Apply. And there's a timeline for this excerpt. Now, suppose we made a mistake and we realized that we're also supposed to mark the basic and contrasting ideas for the antecedent phrase. In other words, what we want to do is we want to take this antecedent phrase and make two smaller bubbles within it to show where the basic and contrasting idea are. Unfortunately, there's not an easy way to do that on Audio Timeliner. What we'll have to do is we'll have to make a new boundary where the contrasting idea begins, and then we'll have to relabel it and then group them together to form the antecedent. So let me show you how that works if you have to do something like this. I'll play the antecedent and then I'll press return when the contrasting idea begins. Contrasting idea. Okay, and now you see what happened is when I made the boundary, it just took the first half and gave it that antecedent label, which is not what we meant. So we'll have to relabel these. Apply, contrasting idea, apply. Now we'll take these two ideas together and we'll group them like we did before. Let me move this down here. And we'll label that antecedent. So there's no easy way of taking one group and then dividing it into smaller subgroups, unfortunately. Otherwise, this is a pretty nice program. Let's do the same thing for the consequent phrase. So I'll click on it, and that will bring my time point over to the beginning of that section. And I'll mark where the contrasting idea begins. Contrasting idea. Okay, and then I need to change these labels again. Okay, and again, I'll group these. Then I'll select both of them and click on Group. All right, and finally, if you have several different levels of bubbles, you can also use the up and down arrows to move between these different levels. Excuse me. So if I click on up, that will take me to this largest level. If I click on down, that will take me to the antecedent. If I click on down again, that will take me to the basic idea. So you can move between these different levels of form. All right. Finally, what you should do, of course, is save your work always. So you would the way to do that is you go to File, click on Save Timeline As, and this will give you this dialog box. So type in the file name, and please always type in your last name as part of your file name so I know that the work is yours. And click on Save, and it will save it as a TIM, which is a timeline file. And that TIM file is what you will upload to Canvas. That's all you need to know. Have a great day.